Biblical terms describes the sin of greed as the principle of always craving more and never being satisfied. As Luke 12:25 states, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in abundance of possessions." Now, while this verse specifically speaks about greed for possessions, I'm going to be speaking more broadly on the principle of just craving more and never being satisfied. Up until now, most of my videos have been focused on the sins and mistakes that athletes make to destroy themselves. But today, I also want to look at a coach's greed and how it can be equally, if not more dangerous than an athlete. On both sides, there's nothing wrong with wanting more for each other. A coach's job is to expect more from an athlete, and an athlete's job is to expect more from themselves. But there's a fine line between pursuing success in a way that builds you up and indulging in a workload that will ultimately break you down. To explore this, I'm going to analyze the story of Fletcher, Andrew Neiman, and the movie Whiplash, which it's not directly related to sports, but later you're going to see how it draws parallels to the athletic world in a powerful way. We start off the story following a character, Andrew Neiman, who dreams of being the next Buddy Rich, who was an American jazz drummer who's arguably been considered the best jazz drummer of all time since rising to fame in the 1940s. Andrew dreams of following in his footsteps, and the story takes place in New York at Shaver Conservatory, which is one of, if not the most prestigious music schools. This leads us to Fletcher, the jazz conductor at Shaver, and it's also all that's revealed about Fletcher is that he's searching for a protege, his so-called kind of Charlie Parker, referring to the jazz legend who died at just 34 years old. Fletcher uses Charlie to symbolize the musical genius that he wants to discover, that diamond in a rough that he wants to just mold into his own image, someone he can push past their absolute limit, someone who's willing to endure whatever it takes to become great. On the surface, we have two individuals who somewhat want the same thing. Neiman wants to become a great musician, and Fletcher wants to shape a great musician. At first, their dynamic looks positive. When they first meet for rehearsals, Fletcher is almost overly nice to him, to Neiman, telling him he's special and that to just go in there and have fun because he's special. He builds him up, right? But the second that Andrew makes a mistake, Fletcher's tone kind of shifts, completely tearing down the good impression that he had just built up. This is a manipulation tactic, a way to hook someone into forever chasing validation. By giving Andrew a taste of approval and then ripping it away, Fletcher kind of creates that control. This is the first sign of manipulation that we see. Another example comes in a different rehearsal where it isn't directly directed towards Neiman, but it's where Fletcher convinces the band that someone is playing a wrong note, and he humiliates each player one by one, just insulting them as he goes along, making each one play until finally kicking someone out of the band, only for it to be revealed that there was no wrong note at all. He was simply just toying with their emotions. These two instances just kind of show what type of person Fletcher is, and throughout the film we see him constantly manipulating his students to get what he wants, and something that Neiman kind of falls for so hard it almost leads to his death later. We'll get into that. We start to see Fletcher's grip on Andrew take over his life, and it consumes him. His craft consumes him. Neiman begins subconsciously molding himself into Fletcher's version of Charlie Parker. He isolates himself, pushes others away, and even snaps at his own family. At this point, it's no longer just a dream for Andrew. He feels like he has something to prove, not to his family, to his family, but not to his family, not to the world, but ultimately to Fletcher. Fletcher sees this and pulls his strings and uses Andrew like a puppet, basically. One of Fletcher's longest running tactics is making Neiman feel special, then ripping it away. It's almost summed up in a single statement of oh, never mind, I was wrong, you're not that special after all, right? And Fletcher repeatedly uses this narrative over and over and over again of giving the validation, oh yeah, that's what's up, and being oh wait, never mind, I guess that's not what I thought, and not just through words but through his actions. He uses a replacement drummer, and his name was Ryan, to remind Andrew he's always replaceable, and just hold that over his head. This drives Neiman to push himself far past his breaking point, which is exactly what Fletcher wants. Multiple times, Fletcher puts Ryan in Andrew's spot, forcing Andrew to constantly compete for approval. The pressure all boils over during a major competition out of town. Andrew, he's rushing to make it. He rides the bus to pick up a rental car. Distracted by the upcoming performance, he leaves his drumsticks behind at the rental place. And when he realizes, he drives back to go get them, like kind of claiming that like, oh, I just left them in the car, when he left them about 10 minutes away. So that's 10 there, 10 back. And on the way back, he's hit by a truck and just like bloodied and injured. He still drags himself to the concert hall to play. This moment shows how far Fletcher's manipulation has pushed him past reason, beyond safety, beyond self-preservation. It's no longer about self-respect. It's no longer about my health or anything. It's doing things for the good of the band or for Fletcher's validation, which is ultimately kind of just like the low point of this story, right? So before this, Fletcher had constantly just been like dangling Ryan over Andrew's head, saying things like, you lost the part, we'll just have Ryan play. These words cut so deep that Andrew spirals into like emotional crashes, lashing out. He's on the phone calling, telling him like yelling, like, just tell him I'm coming. In the end, we see him kind of get his big moment. He gets this huge drum solo where to me, like, it's supposed to be a win, but I don't think it is, because he kind of succumbs to the full kind of control of Fletcher, where he's just like this puppet who's just gonna do anything that he wants him to do, and he gives his whole life, he gives his whole soul to Fletcher and to music. Like, he cuts off family and everything like that and sacrifices that just for the approval of Fletcher, and that's ultimately kind of like a loss in my eyes. So throughout the story, we see a kid who once had a life outside of music. He spent time with family, like the girl from his local movie theater. He genuinely loved jazz, and we see him become consumed by obsession, and his identity becomes wrapped up in his craft and in Fletcher's validation. To Neiman, if he could just please Fletcher, then he would finally be good. Then he would finally be enough. So he kind of just has like this gatekeeper of like, if I can just make him happy, if I could just make him satisfied, then I'll be good. And that's the danger that we kind of see in parallel to athletics, where we'll have like a coach or something like that, where if I can just make him, if I can just like, if I could just get his approval, then I'll be enough. And that's the most unhealthy type of like coach-athlete relationship, and this is the one we see in here. So we see that parallel to athletics come in sports, where there's a shared vision between a coach and their athletes. The athlete has their own personal goals, and the coach's job is to help them reach those goals while holding them accountable. And to be clear, I'm not excusing, like, this isn't me just being overly dramatic about coaches that want the best for you truly. This is not for like an excuse for lazy or soft athletes who don't want to work, or they blame their coach for being tough, but they don't, like, they've only done like one event, or they just don't feel like working. This is not for them. To be great, you need to work. And sometimes that's hard, but there's a fine line between a coach pushing you to improve and a coach demanding more than everything, risking your health in the process. And in Whiplash, we see Neiman sacrifice his physical and mental health just to meet the expectations of his conductor, his coach, his gatekeeper. That same dynamic happens in athletics all the time, especially with star athletes. They may be injured or struggling with something, but they'll be too afraid to speak up about it, worried that their coach will prioritize points or wins or their well-being, because most of the time that is what's going to happen, because people know who their coach is. They spend more time with them than they do with their parents sometimes. It may not look like Fletcher throwing a chair or screaming insults, but the mindset is the same, of valuing results over people. And as an athlete, you need to recognize when someone is making you feel guilty for protecting your own health, because sometimes that's different than laziness. We'll be dramatic, like, and a lot of the times with athletes, we get people who cry wolf, where it's like, I don't want to do the 4x4. Oh my goodness, I don't want to do the 4x4. My leg hurts, coach. And then we have people who genuinely are like, I can't do this. Like, I will get hurt if I do this, and like, or I'll get hurt if I play today. You know, and it's like it gets blurred. You know, the line gets blurred, and because if someone is willing to make you feel that way, they don't, like, over your health, they don't truly want the best for you. They just want the best for themselves and for their own image, right? At the end of the day, though, not every coach that pushes you is a Fletcher, and not every athlete who is obsessed is a Neiman. This is simply a warning of knowing the difference between being pushed and being used, because your health, your life, and your love for the game should never be the price of someone else's ambition.